I don't really talk about this night. Not to my girlfriend, not to my family, not to my friends. People hear home invasion and think of mass burglars or random criminals. Mine was different. Mine was someone my girlfriend used to know, someone she used to trust, someone I assumed was part of her past and nothing more. It was her ex, Evan. And the worst part is, he had been warning us for weeks without either of us understanding what was happening. For a little bit of background, my girlfriend Kara dated Evan for almost 2 years before I ever met her. I want to be clear, he wasn't the stereotypical violent ex. No hitting, no screaming fights, nothing like that. But he had the kind of personality where everything felt intense, like way too intense. He was clingy and possessive. He was also emotionally manipulative, in that subtle way that makes you question if you're overreacting. When she finally had left him, he didn't handle it well. He showed up at her work twice, showed up at her house once, sent her pages-long messages about how she ruined his life. Then he disappeared. 2 years had passed, she moved on, and then we met. In the 7 months we've been together, the only time she ever mentioned him were quick, casual references. Old stories. I only saw one old photo of the guy. He looked normal, clean-cut, quiet expression, not someone who'd stand out in a crowd. If anything, he looked forgettable, which is why nothing felt suspicious when strange things started happening, at least not at first. About a month before the break-in, little things in our apartment kept being wrong. The kitchen door was slightly open even though we always closed them completely, a jacket on the couch that she swore she had hung up, my wallet moved about a foot to the right on the counter, a window lock not clicked down all the way. We blamed it on the long day, stress, absent-mindedness, the normal excuses. Then one night, we found the front door unlocked. Deadbolt, completely undone. I remember telling her, "You probably just forgot after bringing the groceries in." I said it lightly, but my stomach kind of tightened. Kara was practically obsessive about locking doors. For her to forget didn't make sense. The next day, we changed the locks. We both slept better for a while, until that night. It was the Friday before winter break. Kara went to her mom's for the evening, stayed home since I had an early shift for the next morning. I fell asleep on the couch around 10 p.m. When I woke up, it was almost midnight, and the house felt cold in a way the thermostat didn't really explain. I grabbed to grab water from the kitchen. That's when I noticed the back porch light was on. We never used that light. It wasn't motion activated. It was wired to a switch inside the house. Someone had turned it on. A slow, tight feeling pulled at my chest. I went to the blinds and peeked through them. At first I saw nothing. Then my eyes adjusted. I could see in the snow there was footprints leading away from the back door and down the steps. They were fresh and deep. They definitely weren't there earlier. I stepped back from the blinds fast. I reached for my phone to call Kara. It wasn't on the coffee table. I found it on the floor, face down. The screen smudged like someone had handled it. And I knew for a fact I didn't drop it. There was this feeling of slow dread that crawled up my spine. Someone had been inside. And as that thought landed, I heard something behind me. A floorboard shifting, not loud or dramatic, just the weight of a person gently trying not to be heard. Coming from the hallway by our bedroom, you ever be so scared that you feel heat running through your limbs instead of cold? Like your body fires up because it knows what's about to happen? That's what hit me. The hallway lights were off, so it looked like a dark tunnel. I didn't want to go near it. Every instinct said to run out the front door, but that meant turning my back to the hallway. I grabbed the only thing within reach, a heavy ceramic candle holder, and held it like some awkward club. I took one slow step toward the hallway, and someone stepped out. A shape at first, then a person. Tall, shoulders slightly hunched. He didn't move toward me. He didn't back away. He was just standing there. I could feel my throat start to tighten. Then he stepped forward enough for the light from the kitchen to hit his face. I recognized him instantly. Evan, Kara's ex. He didn't look angry or emotional. He looked hollow, blank, like he'd already decided something. He stared at me for a full second before speaking. "You shouldn't be here." He didn't yell it or whisper it. He just said it like it was a fact he fully believed. I asked him, "What do you want?" He didn't move, but his voice changed. "You took something that wasn't yours." It wasn't necessarily jealousy or heartbreak. It felt like entitlement, like he thought Kara was property he'd misplaced. I stepped back towards the kitchen, and he stepped forward. "She wasn't supposed to replace me," he said. His tone stayed even, and somehow that was worse than if he'd shouted. I held the ceramic up, not trying to look tough, just not trying to look scared. I told him to get out right now. He tilted his head slightly, almost like he was curious. "You won't stop me." And then he moved. I want to be completely honest. Real fights are nothing like movies. There's no clean punches, you don't exchange hits, you don't think, you just panic. When he lunged, he didn't throw a punch, he grabbed for my wrist, trying to yank the ceramic out of my hand. His fingers were digging hard enough to bruise my skin immediately. We stumbled into the wall. I tried to swing upward, but it missed his head and hit his shoulder. He grunted, but he didn't let go. He pushed me back, trying to pin me. I twisted, slipped, and we both hit the floor. It was this ugly fall where my elbow cracked against the tile hard. Then he got on top of me. He wasn't trying to punch me, just trying to control my arms, maybe get to my throat. His breath smelled like metal, like he'd bitten his lip. I shoved at his face, got a finger into his eye by accident. He shouted, the first loud noise he'd made, and let go long enough for me to roll to the side. I jolted up, nearly slipping, using the counter to pull myself up. He stumbled up too, wiping his eye, and he was breathing really hard. I grabbed the nearest object, a stainless steel water bottle. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. He ran at me again, but not cleanly. His shoulder clipped the counter and threw his balance off. I swung the bottle and it hit the side of his head. It didn't do much damage, but it did stop him for a sec. He swayed, hands going out to steady himself on the fridge. That was the only opening I had. I didn't aim, I just swung again. I hit him right in the jaw. He fell to his knees. He wasn't unconscious, but he looked dazed, like his brain was short-circuited. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely keep hold of the bottle. I didn't try to knock him out, I didn't try to restrain him, I just ran. Barefoot, no jacket, out the front door into the freezing air. I screamed for help and a neighbor opened their door within seconds. The police ended up getting there in under 4 minutes. Evan tried to leave the apartment but only made it to the back door before falling again. He was arrested on the spot, swollen eye, bleeding from his cheekbone, half conscious. When they searched him, they found a small folding knife, our old house key before we changed our locks, a piece of notebook paper with our address written twice, and the weirdest part, Kara's full name written over and over again. The police said he'd likely been entering the apartment for weeks before the break-in, testing our routines, learning when we weren't home. He didn't come to steal, or talk, or scare us. He came because he believed Kara still belonged to him. When Kara arrived at the scene, she broke down completely. She kept saying how it was her fault and she was so sorry, but she couldn't have known. People like him hide their escalation till the last second. We moved about a month later. New locks, new building, ground floor with visible neighbors on every side. I sleep with a baseball bat beside the bed, not because I expect him to come back, he's actually serving time now, but because once something like this happens, your brain literally changes. You don't brush off strange noises, you don't ignore instincts, you don't assume you're safe because the door is locked. And sometimes when I'm half asleep, I still hear his voice in that low, steady tone. You shouldn't be here. Like I was intruding on his life. Like I had taken something he was owed. I was 19 when this happened. It was the first winter I'd ever spent living completely alone. And I stayed behind because I had just started a job and didn't want to uproot everything again. The idea of having a whole house to myself sounded great at first. Quiet, independence, all that stuff. But being alone has a way of amplifying every little sound a home makes. Heating pipes, wind against the siding, the fridge kicking on. You start talking yourself out of being scared because you don't want to admit you're actually terrified. It was early November on a Thursday night. I remember because I had work the next morning and I was trying to force myself to go to bed before midnight. Something I was terrible at. The house was freezing, way colder than usual. Our furnace had always been old and moody, but that night it felt like the vents were blowing nothing but cold air. I layered up and climbed into bed anyway. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I remember is waking up to a faint thump. Not loud or aggressive, a single thud like something tapping the floor. I stayed under the blanket for a minute, half asleep and annoyed. I genuinely thought it was the house settling, or maybe a branch hitting the siding outside. Then I heard it again. This time it sounded louder, like it was coming from beneath me, from the basement. My body kinda tensed up. I told myself it was the furnace making weird noises again, but the furnace didn't sound like footsteps. I sat up and listened, but I heard nothing. But even the silence felt wrong, too heavy, too expectant. Still, trying to convince myself I was overreacting, I got out of bed, grabbed my phone, and opened the hallway door. I wasn't going to go downstairs, I just wanted to hear if anything else happened. At the top of the stairs, I waited. The house stayed still for almost a full minute. Just when I started to relax a little, something moved. This time it wasn't subtle. A shuffle, slow, dragging, like someone shifting their weight on concrete. The basement floor was concrete. My heart started to beat a little bit faster now. I backed away from the stairwell and shut my bedroom door quietly, like I was terrified the noise would give me away. I grabbed the only thing I could use as a weapon in my room, an old metal flashlight. I called 911, whispering as quietly as I could. The dispatcher asked if someone was inside the house. I told him I didn't know. But when she asked me questions, I heard it again. But this time it wasn't a shuffle, it sounded like breathing. Slow, shaky breathing drifting up the stairwell, like someone trying to keep quiet but failing. I froze completely. I didn't even blink. On the phone, the dispatcher kept asking me to speak up, but my voice refused to work. After what felt like forever, the dispatcher said officers were only a few minutes out, and she told me to stay where I was. I remember nodding even though she couldn't see me. Then another sound, not from the basement, from outside the hallway. The soft creak of the floorboards right outside my bedroom door. The breathing had stopped, but now there was movement. Silent, like someone was trying very hard not to be heard. I don't know how long I stood there staring at the doorknob. Every scary thought I'd ever had crashed in on me at once. Then softly, I could barely hear it, the doorknob clicked. Not turning, just like someone touched it. Like he touched it with his finger. I whispered into the phone that he's right outside my room. The dispatcher told me officers were pulling into the neighborhood. She told me to stay quiet and stay where I was. Then I heard that click again. Then another sound of footsteps moving away. The silence was so much worse. I had no idea if he was waiting somewhere, trying to lure me into opening the door, or hiding again. Finally, after what felt like 2 hours, but was maybe 2 minutes at most, red and blue lights were flashing through my window. A firm knock echoed through my house, followed by the police announcing themselves. I sprinted to my bedroom door, opening it a few inches. I yelled out that I was upstairs, and the officers told me to come down slowly. I practically flew down the stairs. There were 4 officers inside, 2 at the front, 1 checking the kitchen, and 1 at the basement door. They asked me what I heard. I barely managed to explain before the officer at the basement door said, "We've got something." He had opened the door only a foot, flashlight aimed downward. His expression had changed completely. He motioned the others over. I stayed where I was, gripping the stair railing so tight my hand went numb. Another officer went down first, then another, then a third. The silence that followed made my skin crawl. When they finally came back up, the lead officer walked toward me and asked if anyone else lived here or had a key. I shook my head. He exchanged a look with the others, then said, "There's a makeshift living area down there." I genuinely felt my legs weaken. He told me there was blankets, canned food, a small propane heater, water bottles. Like someone was staying down there for a long time. I didn't say anything, I literally couldn't. Then he told me another thing which was very uncomfortable. There's also a chair placed directly under the vent that leads to the upstairs. He might have been trying to listen to you. Listening? So he was trying to listen to me talk on the phone, move around, sleep. They didn't find the guy. Not that night. Not ever. At least as far as I know. But they said that based on the setup and how quickly he disappeared, he probably knew the house well. Maybe even from before my family lived there. Or he could have been a homeless person who found an unlocked basement window months earlier. The scariest part of this whole thing is, I had gone down to the basement earlier that week to reset the breaker after a power surge. I remember feeling like something smelled off, kind of like sweat, but I brushed it off. He could have been watching me then, or just hiding out of sight. The furnace guy checked everything the next day and confirmed someone had tampered with it, probably to force me to go downstairs more often. That was the moment it really sank in. He didn't just want shelter, he wanted access to my house. I ended up moving out. I couldn't stay in that place another night after the police left. For weeks afterward, I kept imagining the quiet breathing through the vent, the soft shuffle of someone standing right beneath my bedroom. I'm honestly never going to forget this experience. It's something that definitely has kept me on my feet over the years. But now I just know to look out for things. I was 16 when this story happened. Old enough to think I was an adult, young enough to still be stupid about how safe I thought the world was. My mom worked night shifts at the hospital 3 or 4 times a week, so our house was usually quiet after sunset. I used to love it, having that freedom, music as loud as I wanted, microwave dinners at midnight, all of that. But the night this story happened, the house didn't feel like freedom at all. It felt like an exposed stage, and I was the only one standing on it. It was the middle of Christmas break, and we were getting hit with a nasty cold front. Temperatures in the single digits, ice forming everywhere, the kind of winter where even the neighborhood dogs stopped barking because they didn't want to be outside. My room sat on the 2nd floor, facing the back of the house. Behind us was a stretch of woods, not deep enough to be a forest, but thick enough that you couldn't see more than a few feet into it after dark. I never minded it before, I grew up here. The woods were just a part of the scenery. That night though, those trees looked like black silhouettes pressed against the window. I remember drawing my curtains closed earlier than usual because something about them was making me uneasy. Around 11 p.m., I went downstairs for a snack. I wasn't tired, so I figured I'd watch TV until my mom got home at 2 a.m. The house felt extra quiet. No pipes creaking, no fridge hum, nothing. It was the kind of silence where you could hear your own heartbeat if you sit still long enough. I heated up some leftovers, sat on the couch, and turned on the TV. It was during the second commercial break that I heard it, a knock on the backsliding door. I turned the volume down completely and listened. Another tap, a little louder this time. Not like someone was knocking for help, more like someone testing it, touching it to see if anyone was awake. I told myself it was probably a branch, maybe ice falling from the roof. Anything else, but branches didn't knock and ice didn't tap twice. Every hair on my neck stood up. I kept the TV on but muted just in case whoever or whatever was outside watching. I didn't want to signal I was reacting. Slowly I stood up and stepped behind the wall that separated the living room from the kitchen. From there I could peek toward the sliding door without being fully visible. The outdoor motion light didn't turn on, which made sense because it had been broken for months. But the moon was reflecting off the snow just enough that I could see the outline of the door. Someone was standing there, a shadow perfectly still right up against the glass. I didn't move, I didn't even blink, I just stared, trying to figure out if I was really seeing what I thought I was seeing. Then my worst fear was confirmed. The figure leaned forward just slightly, and a face pressed up against the glass. The face was pale, or maybe it just looked that way through the moonlight, and the eyes were too wide, not frantic or scared, just watching and observing. I backed away slowly. My phone was upstairs, my shoes were by the front door, my brain kept screaming at me to move. But fear does this thing where it locks you inside your own body. Another tap on the glass, this time louder. I forced myself to breathe quietly through my nose, and took one step up the stairs. I didn't run, running would make too much noise, and tell him exactly where I was. I moved like I was bouncing glass on my shoulders. When I reached the top, I slipped into my room, closed the door, and finally grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I kept hitting the wrong numbers. When I got 911 dialed, the operator answered almost instantly and asked what's the emergency. I whispered that someone was outside my house at the back door. She told me to stay upstairs in a locked room, and officers were on their way. Then something happened that I still think about more than I should. I heard the sliding door move, not open, but this scraping shift sound like someone was dragging their fingers across the track, testing it. I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. And then I heard a knock, but not downstairs this time. The knock was higher, above me, at my bedroom window. I nearly dropped my phone. My room was on the second floor. There was no deck, no balcony, no patio cover. Nothing a person could climb. The operator asked if I was still there, and I whispered that someone's at my window. She asked if it could be tree branches, and I told her no, there were no trees anywhere near close enough. Another knock, then a dragging sound across the glass. My legs went out from under me, and I sat down on the floor hard. I stared at the window from across the room. The curtains were closed, but thin. I could see the faint outline of movement behind them, a hand slowly tracing across the glass. Then I heard a voice, weak, feminine, whispering, "Let me in, I'm cold." I think that was a moment I fully broke, because every instinct in me screamed that that voice wasn't right. It sounded like someone pretending to be helpless, like someone imitating a young girl. It wasn't scared, it wasn't crying, it was just off. The operator kept talking, trying to keep me grounded, but the voice at the window spoke again, this time clearer. "I know you can hear me." I genuinely almost threw up. Then for the first time I saw a shadow move directly across the curtains, too tall to belong to any kind of young girl. I backed into the closet and shut the door, not because I thought it would keep me safer, but because the idea of being in the open made my skin crawl. Minutes passed, slow, suffocating minutes. Then finally the sirens. A really loud knock at the front door, along with the police announcing that they were here. The shadow at my window froze, then slid out of view. The police actually came upstairs to get me. I could barely speak. 2 officers escorted me downstairs and made me stay on the couch while others checked the perimeter. After about 10 minutes, one returned and asked me a question that still lives in my head. "Do you know if the person was walking near the side of your house?" I stared at him kind of confused and said, "I had no idea." He took a deep breath and said, "There are footprints in the snow leading up to your bedroom window, and based on the spacing, whoever it was climbing on something." They walked me outside safely with flashlights and pointed. There were tracks in the snow, fresh ones, leading from the tree line to the back door, then to the side of the house where the siding had scuff marks. They were right, something had been dragged up against a wall. A ladder maybe, or a large branch, something tall enough to reach my second-story window. But that wasn't the part that stayed with me the longest. The footprints ended at the woods, but there were no prints leading into the woods, only out. The police searched the trees for nearly an hour. Nothing, no movement, no broken branches, no more tracks. They told me sometimes wind buries snow, but that didn't make sense. Not when every other footprint was crisp and deep. I spent the rest of my winter break at my cousin's house. My mom actually wanted to move, but financially just wasn't possible. We ended up getting some cameras, lights, alarms, everything we possibly could. But here's the truth. I don't think any of that matters, because 3 weeks after the near break-in, in early January, the coldest night of the month, my mom found something stuck in our mailbox. Not a note, not a threat, just a perfectly clean handprint pressed in some sort of paint or something. It was small and delicate like a child's. Except the fingers were too long and the palm was too narrow. The police actually came and took some photos as evidence, but I don't think they ever figured anything out. They told us it might have been someone messing with us. But people don't climb to second-story windows in a snowstorm. People don't vanish into untouched snow. People don't imitate voices like that. Winter ended, but that silhouette at the window, the way it moved, the way it whispered, still keeps me awake sometimes. Because whatever's at my house that night, it didn't break in to steal anything. I feel like it wanted to be invited inside.